registration for today's session. I'd like to thank Moodle headquarters and Moodle News and everybody else who helped us promote this session. It's a great topic. I think everybody would be pretty excited about the presentation today. So again, my name is Randy Jones. I'm the Vice President here at eThink, and I'd like to take a minute just to set the stage before introducing our guest today. Here at eThink, we're in our 10th year of providing the most popular learning platform in the world, Moodle. We work with K-12, higher education, professional learning, and due to the nature of our business and the flexibility of Moodle, we're lucky enough to be introduced to some really cool companies and some really interesting industry innovators. That's why we host these monthly sessions here, just to share with our clients and the Moodle market as a whole the unique and powerful products that integrate really well with Moodle, as well as these supremely talented people who work with Moodle every day on Moodle-related projects. More on eThink. As I said, we're in our 10th year of business. We have a 99% client retention rate in those 10 years. This is a number that we're really proud of, and it's primarily due to the incredible services team that we have here at eThink. We take a fully managed approach and essentially become the extension of your team that's responsible for hosting and servicing your Moodle. And we find that due to our scale, we can provide these services more economically to those who self-host, and our team of experts can typically work wonders when it comes to improving the Moodle UI, integrations, configurations, things of that nature. I need to update this slide. Exciting. We're up over 100 million registered learners now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides, sort of these background Moodle slides. The audience today is very familiar with Moodle. One of the most important things I'll say about this slide is the M. The M in Moodle is for modular. The modularity of the system is what a lot of these partner webinars is based on, just the ability to manipulate and integrate and improve upon Moodle. Again, extensively used in corporate and government, nonprofit, as well as K through 20. And here's some stats. I just pulled these really within the hour. There's that over 100 million registered user mark, 101, 408, 210. Pretty amazing when compared to other platforms in the industry. So I pulled these numbers today. I look at them maybe once a week, maybe more than I should admit I do. They're definitely pretty impressive numbers. So I'm going to give an introduction to both of our presenters here today before turning it over to Mike to kick us off. First, to introduce Mike as the CEO of Problem Solutions. He's a technologist with experiences spanning across standards, emerging technologies, learning and science. He's a former researcher at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. He provides technology, business model, and innovation solutions to the Fortune 500, to the government and startups. His team has been stewarding the efforts for the last 8 years at the Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative on the Experience API, which we all know as xAPI or Tin Can. Mike, I appreciate you being here today. And joining us after Mike's session will be Aaron Page and Marlene Zentz. They are consultants who have focused on Moodle accessibility for a number of years. They instruct on the accessible course design in Moodle, including the usability of content uploaded into Moodle, and test Moodle plugins and configurations. Today, Aaron and Marlene will focus their presentation on universal design for learning and Moodle, accessibility workshops and opportunities, and lastly, services tailored to client needs. I actually had the pleasure of listening in on the wonderful keynote that Aaron and Marlene provided at the 2016 US Moot, which is how we actually got to know Marlene and Aaron. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. With that said, I'm going to kick it over to you, Mike, for your portion of the presentation. Again, I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Just want to confirm that you can see my screen.
Looks perfect. Yep, looks great.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for taking time out of your day. You're here because you're a learning professional, or you're interested in helping people get better or in your organization, or maybe you're interested in just learning more about the Experience API, or you just love open source software. I love all these things, and that's kind of why I'm here. And thank you guys at eThink for having me, and I'm looking forward to our next presenters as well. I had a second to talk to them, and I'm looking forward to at least 60 more after this is all over. Thanks for that introduction, Randy, and just a little bit about Problem Solutions. To sum it up, we're really a technology, strategy, and product mercenary firm. We help you figure out the really hard things that you're working on, and even some of the easier ones that are obstacles, and get you there from 0 to 1 the fastest way possible. And that's with anything from mobile applications to machine learning, or even building your own learning and product systems from the ground up. So that being said, we've been working with ADL, the Advanced Distributed Learning, the folks that brought you the SCORM, for 8 years. We went back to the folks at ADL ways back and said, learning management systems are great, SCORM's wonderful, but learning happens everywhere. We need a way to track that data. It would be awesome if we could collect the data in really meaningful ways to help people better navigate the world. You know, everybody, I'm sure you've all heard it before, learning should be like GPS. It knows where we're at, it knows where we're going, and based upon the data that's available and the maps and the pathways, it gets us really the best way there possible. But how are our learning systems like that? Are they really just turn left on the street and go to the end, or are we really helping learners in our organizations on these long pathways to building their knowledge and competency and excellence and having satisfaction? If you think about the best teacher that you've ever had, I'll give everyone a couple seconds, it shouldn't take you too long. Think about that teacher that was the most influential in your life. What did they do that made them amazing? What is it that made them different that you're thinking about them right now? I've heard a lot of answers through time, and if you guys want to throw some answers in there, that would be great. But the more I hear about what makes great teachers awesome, the more I realize that the systems that we deliver to our learners don't do many of those things. They don't give us the right level of challenge. They don't have compassion. They don't deliver us the right drips of information at the right point in time. They don't understand when we need more or when we need less. And this idea of learning ecosystems is something that's very near and dear to our world and the way that we think about technology. But our learning systems should be like GPS. They should be helping us understand where people are at, where we can get them to, and really how to get them there the best way possible. You know, imagine in 1993, whenever GPS satellites were really becoming fully functional in space. At that point in time, we really weren't thinking about business models like Uber or Waze in any ways. But in reality, those two types of business models are emergent atop the affordances of this global positioning ecosystem. And it's that ecosystem that allows us to get from point A to point B faster. So when you're starting to think about your learning and your learning ecosystems, I would challenge you to think about, you know, what are the new models that you might have in your organization? What's your Uber? What figures out where you're at, where you want to go, and gets you there quickly? And what is your traffic manager in some ways? Looking out at some of the research from McKinsey and Center for Creative Leadership, people are interested in adaptive learning. If we adapt or tailor the learning, we can get people to task faster. We can also get them to a higher level of proficiency within the same time. Experiential learning. Learning by doing is absolutely essential. This is how the majority of trades were learned through our history in this world. And then the 70-20-10 rule. We've all heard it. We hear the numbers. But doing it isn't necessarily easy. And there aren't simple ways to plug in If anyone's doing it, any 70, 20, 10 out there, and you've got technology, love for you to throw some stuff in the chat and share some information with everybody. It makes sense, but it's hard to do it, and there's not necessarily a lot of out-of-the-box stuff to pull it off. What do learners want, though? I mean, what if you went around and polled everybody, what would they tell you? You know, the mantra of ADL for a long time has been anywhere, anytime learning. That's true. We can use our phone and we can access all the information that we want, even on our desktop. But what do we really need next? Well, learners that we've talked to say, I want self-guided, I want to be a self-starter. I want things for me. I want things that matter at the right time. I don't want everything given to me. I want to berry pick, but I also want credit for those things that I do in my informal learning in some ways. But at the right point in time, I could use some hand-holding. I think the really important thing to consider for everybody is that there's so much information that's available to our learners. How do we provide them the maximum amount of signal and not the noise? You know, they're all on these precarious journeys along their continuum of development in our organizations. How do we provide them the right amount of support? I think everybody knows that our learners do want to succeed. They do want to make it to the other side of the chasm. And it's scary in terms of development along the way. And our organizations may be simple in terms of learning progressions, but some of them may be more complex. And we need that right amount of support along the continuum that gives them the signal, that gives them the self-support, that enables them the opportunities to grow and to move faster where they can, and gives them enough time. Learning ecosystems are something that's critically important, and this is a concept we've been driving home for a while. What do? First of all, we need to access it from anywhere. Second, we need to be able to learn from a self-discovery mode. We need to have systems that are pushing recommendations to us. Everybody knows Amazon. Amazon is great because it tells me really, literally what I should do next for my buying behaviors. But if I had the Amazon for learning and it knew about what my intention was, it could tell me what types of things I might want to do next. In terms of modalities, we're all using web and we're using LMSs, and hopefully you're using Moodle. But there are other modalities like simulations and games and virtual worlds. And at the end of the day, anytime, anywhere learning is great, but our learners want just in time, just for them. They really want right time experiences. Now, I've been collecting these for a bit here. The learning ecosystem has a lot of different pieces to it. We have mobile and social and video and virtual reality, and wearable devices are proliferating at an exponential rate. These things are great. They're all really important, but how do we leverage them together? Well, this is a nice mosaic. The resulting data from all of these sources could be a daunting task to extract any type of value from. I ask you to take maybe 10 seconds here and look at these and pick what are the top 3 or 4 of these that are most important to your learning ecosystem. Sorry, that was 9 seconds. In terms of business, these are great ideas, these are great concepts, and there's a bigger future here that's potential together. But what are the business drivers that really will help us as leaders in our organizations get the buy-in that we need? So one important question is this person ready to do what they need to do? Are they able to exercise the competencies in performance that they need? And if not, what do they actually need to do to be ready? Because if you think about it, your first learners that show up are not ready, and we know they're not ready. So the question is, what do they need to do to be ready? And then if you think about that at the next level up of groups and teams, is this group really ready to do what they need to do? And if not, what do we need to do to get them there? And this one I call the rock star question. Who are my rock stars and what do they eat for breakfast? Or who is so good? Who are my exemplars within any given job, whether it be sales or management? And what is it? What are those causal things along their learning pathway that really help them to get there? And then what do we need to do more of, or what does someone need to do more of, or less of? These things are absolutely important business driver questions that can be used to build out your business case for your learning ecosystem. So what is this experience API, and why do we need another standard? The good thing about standards is we have so many to choose from. Unfortunately, there's not a great data interoperability standard for all of those systems that I showed you on the learning ecosystem mosaic. So we've been working with the ADL folks to identify a lightweight way that we could track any learning experience and store it in a learning record store. An LRS is a database that stores learning content. For those of you that are developers or have done some programming before, Experience API is a JSON or JavaScript object notation method for describing an interaction between a person and another person, or a person and a system. It comes in the form of actor, verb, object as elements of a statement, but there are also additional elements. So you could say, I read this book, I watched this movie, but there are also additional elements called context, results, and extensions, where you could describe a much more rich interaction. So I flew this helicopter simulator under the following task conditions and standards, and I was measured for the following proficiencies, and I demonstrated proficiency at these levels, and these were the knowledge, skills, and abilities that I attained through that experience. So you can be very simple, very lightweight, very granular, and ultimately depends on what use cases you're trying to fulfill with your data collection. So what are some examples of the xAPI data? And certainly, a simple example would be, I'm in an LMS, I took a course, that course has these ELOs or TLOs, or these competencies associated with it metadata-wise, and this idea of completion, which we're all used to tracking. But there's some other areas too. So if I had a performance support application, maybe on an airplane, and I navigated through certain procedures, we could say the pilot, Jill Smith, used the procedures for this. And if we collected that data over time, we could see commonly used performance support items at common jobs, and we could better recommend those, or we could tune those to our user's experience. We could also take data from systems. We could say this plane experienced a hard landing, and after pilot Jill Smith had 3 hard landings, or even 1, we could be sending her some mobile learning cue about how to land more softly, how to have more empathy for your passengers. We could also be looking at simulator data. We could be looking at mobile performance support, and then we could also be observing users and taking that observational data and pushing that data. All these data sources would go into our learning record store, and we could use applications to visualize these or to make recommendations along someone's learning path. One of the challenges that I see is most often is, what data should I collect? Should I say that Mike watched this video, or should I say Mike watched this video and he hit pause at 2 minutes and 17 seconds for 27 minutes and then he resumed the video? Does that matter? It might. It depends on if you're trying to get feedback to push back to your instructional designers. Or does it matter that Mike watched this video and these were the competencies he should have been made aware of through intersecting with this video? The key thing is collecting data that matters for you and your organization and for the business cases or business drivers. I've heard a few people say before, we'll collect it all and sort it out later. Big data becomes so big that it becomes a big problem. I wouldn't want to see you do that. So for you, for your learning ecosystem, what do you need? You need a learning record store, which is your database. I'll tell you more about those in a second. And you need a learning management system. There's some great open source tools here to pull this off in terms of LRSs. And you're here because you know about Moodle. But you need some other things too, or you could use some other things to enable this GPS functionality that I'm talking about. You could use things to help the users better understand what learning paths are available. So I'm Mike, I'm an engineer. I would love to be a senior engineer. What are the ways that I can get there? What learning experiences do I need? What real world experiences do I need? and what does that pathway look like? What are the things that can help me in the performance of my job as far as performance support or job aids? They're valuable data producers. So now we know where people need structure and support. These are the ropes along our ladder over the glacial crevice. And then real world, we need coaching and mentoring. It's important to not forget about the people factor and leverage that to ensure our users are supported. But one really important thing is knowing what is going on. Seeing is believing, and having the ability to do visualizations just of your learning ecosystem is extremely important. And then being able to perform analytics to understand causality and correlation, to understand things like who are my rock stars and what do they eat for breakfast. So starting with your LRS, you have a number of options that are out there in the marketplace. We built the open source one for ADL. It's a really easy way to get started. You can install it yourself, or they have a hosted version if you're just doing some prototyping internally. There's another open source version called Learning Locker. Learning Locker you can also install, or there's a hosted version that you can leverage. These give you the ability to very quickly start moving with a pilot, to work with your team and not have to worry about procurement hurdles. And working code trumps all theory. So this gets you running out of the box and building something and showing it while you're building your business case. In terms of commercial, there's a company called Saltbox and Wax LRS. There's Watershed from the folks at Rusty Software, and Yet Analytics. They each have different performance and visualization and analytic capabilities. Now you're going to need an LMS, and a number of LMSs have some support for xAPI, and a number don't. There's an estimate that there are about 650 to 700 LMSs in the marketplace. Coincidentally, that is the same amount of makers of tequila as well. I don't know if there's any correlation there. So you can use xAPI in Moodle. Moodle can make xAPI data in a number of different ways, and I've included a couple links here about that. But the key thing is that Moodle can be a valuable producer of data in your learning ecosystem, and you can be up and running very quickly and be producing data about who took what when, or grades or quizzes, which is extremely valuable information coming from your LMS. Learning path. This is hard. When I mentioned 70, 20, 10, and I said it's extremely difficult, I've seen a number of attempts at doing that. There's a product called Trek from a company called Cognitive Advisors, and it works with Moodle to help enable learning paths and build coaching and apprenticeship and models to support your users. There's a new tool that I saw recently called Job Aider, and Job Aider is xAPI enabled and will push data into your learning ecosystem. Certainly there are more, and there are other content management type systems that produce xAPI data. And then there's a ton of other xAPI tools. My assumption is that most often your learning ecosystem, although it will start small, will approach the Mosaic ecosystem that I showed you. So ADL has a listing of tools that are available, and the folks at Watershed have another listing of adopters. So there's everything from tests and question interfaces to plugins for simulation. So if you're trying to do something now, chances are there's something that you can leverage or plug in, or an example. If this was 3 years ago, you'd be operating in a desert. So what can you do to move ahead? First, there's a bigger view of your learning ecosystem. There's something that approaches the Mosaic and has organizational value, and most importantly, it bridges the gap between learning and development and talent management, where the future is a place where people analytics and workplace analytics and Internet of Things and sensors and all of this data is collected and collated in meaningful ways to help our users better navigate the world, or help the world better navigate around our users. And if this is an area that you're interested in, and you're thinking about your ecosystem, We've helped the government and some pretty large organizations through this, and through our partnership with eThink, this is something we could strongly collaborate on to help you be a leader, an example use case within your industry or your marketplace. What can you do tomorrow? Well, you can build a pilot. It's pretty simple. You have a number of systems that people are interacting with. The best way to build a pilot is to pick one user type and one learning path that people are going through, and identify what systems are intersecting with that journey, and determine whether you can instrument data from those systems or not. The second is there's got to be a business case, because no one's boss buys into science projects, and if they do, I'd love to talk to them because I have a lot of fun science projects. The business case is critical here. So can you shorten OJT? Can you expand the opportunities for users to allow them to navigate to more jobs within the organization? Is there an ROI basis? Maybe you have a 30-day onboarding period. Can you cut that 30-day period for some of your users? And then how do you know that you're winning? What's the goalpost look like? You have to have some measure of success, even if it is a pilot. So having a design for your bigger ecosystem and your vision plus a pilot opens the aperture for you to start walking down this path. The next things you need an LRS. Certainly there are a number of options for that. And you need an LMS. I know our eThink guys can help you out with that. But there are definitely some other tools that you want to use to create data. And then you're going to build and you're going to measure from there. There's a lot of information. I know this talk will be posted, and I'm sure the slides will too. There's a lot of information that's available. I've got a ton of articles in Learning Solutions Magazine. TechCrunch had a great article last year about LinkedIn and the xAPI. There's some great pages for adopters. There's a ton of open source stuff that's available. So what can you do tomorrow? Well, you can dream about your learning ecosystem. You can map out those mosaic elements that are available to you, and you can start to frame your pilot. Thank you. I'm going to be available for some questions here, I think, at some point, so I'm glad to do that, but thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Great. Mike, that's awesome. We appreciate your time. I love the who are your rock stars and what do they eat for breakfast. With everybody listening, I'd like for you to give me permission to use that like it was my own so I can be as impressive. I love that line. I'm going to definitely have to steal it.
Steal away.
Yeah, great. As far as questions, just to make sure that Aaron and Marlene have enough time, I'll ask that you put the questions in the control pane of the GoToWebinar control panel here, and Mike can reach out directly to you right there to answer your questions. Again, I want to make sure that we give enough time for Aaron and Marlene to provide their portion of the presentation. So with that being said, please ask those questions. I'm going to turn the screen over to Marlene and Aaron. I really appreciate you all being here. I truly enjoyed your keynote at the Moot, and I'm really excited to have you join us today.
Great, thank you, Randy. Can you see our screen?
Screen looks great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mike. That was a really wonderful presentation. Thank you for all that good information. And Randy, thank you again for inviting Aaron and I to speak. I am Senior Instructional Designer and an Accessibility Specialist at the University of Montana, and I also work as an Accessibility Consultant. And Aaron.
Hi everyone, my name is Aaron Page. I'm a blind assistive technology user, and I've worked with Marlene on accessibility for the last 5 years while I was an undergraduate student. Over the past several years, we've had opportunities to speak at regional, national, and international venues about the importance of creating accessible content. We believe the model that we use of an assistive technology user and a sighted user to demonstrate accessibility is a powerful one.
So Aaron, I have a photo of our two-screen presentation setup from the U.S. Moot last summer that Randy was referring to. And what Aaron was referring to just now too is that when we teach about accessibility, we both project our laptops, and on the left screen is my laptop, which is showing the view that most everyone is used to seeing. And on the right, you're seeing Aaron's laptop where he has various assistive technologies in play. So Aaron, you can take it from there.
So we believe this is a powerful model. It's a model we've seen used at other institutions, including the universities of Washington and Illinois. Between the two of us, we're usually able to cover the whole gamut of accessibility, including captioning, colors and contrast, screen reading and magnification, and speech recognition.
Great. So what we want to start with today is just laying the foundation for what we mean by accessibility, and we want to talk about our belief in universal design. So universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. And that's really critical when we have so many people, say, working in a learning management system. We have people of all abilities. It's really important that we take into consideration universal design and make sure that everyone has a seat at the table. Everyone can access the information. We're used to universal design in the physical world, and I have 3 examples on the screen. Texting, that originated for the deaf and hard of hearing community that we all now use. There's a vegetable peeler with a much better grip on it than the lower one that's just a thin metal peeler. And then curb cuts benefit all of us. So we're really used to seeing the benefits of universal design in the physical world, but it's also really important to consider universal design for learning in the electronic world. And when we start to talk about Moodle, we want to make sure that we're creating learning experiences that are designed to meet the needs of everyone, where all users have access to the same content at the same time, and someone using an assistive technology does not need to ask for an accommodation. So Aaron, when you were a student here at the University of Montana and taking your courses, you did have to ask for accommodations, correct?
Yeah, I did have to request accommodations for nearly all of my courses, except for one course which made really good use of the learning management system.
Great. So that we really want to talk to you about creating and working with Moodle in a way where accommodations are only the very, very last resort in very, very rare situations. So universal design for learning, those are 2 key concepts that will lay the foundation for what we'll talk about next, which is accessibility.
So let's define a couple of terms that often get confused. So those terms are going to be accessibility and usability. While there are many different definitions of accessibility, we prefer the definition that is used in the June 2010 Dear Colleague letter that was released by the Department of Education. In that letter, they define accessible as persons with disabilities can acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as non-disabled persons with substantially equivalent ease of use. One of the reasons we really like this definition of accessibility is right at the very end, where it says substantially equivalent ease of use. This is something that really many retrofitted accessibility solutions, they fall short of this. They don't provide that substantially equivalent ease of use. Usability. So the International Standards Organization defines usable as the effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction with which a specified set of users can achieve a specified set of tasks in a particular environment. One thing we always really want to emphasize with accessibility and usability is it is possible to be accessible and not usable. It is possible to be usable and not accessible. So a few laws that kind of codify all of this, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a broad anti-discrimination law for people with disabilities. And then we have Section 504, which is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It protects the civil rights of people with disabilities by requiring all federal entities and organizations that receive federal funding to make accommodations for equal access. So this means that closed captioning must be provided for users who are deaf or hard of hearing. And then Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, it requires electronic communications and information technologies such as websites, email, or web documents that they must be accessible.
Great, and Erin, I just want to return back to the fact that when you were a student, you had to request accommodations, and when students have to do that, what does that lead to in terms of these laws? How did that make you feel?
In my mind, I just feel that it's very demeaning for a student to even be put in the position of having to ask for access to the same information as everybody else. And then that can lead to all kinds of legal ramifications with civil rights lawsuits and other forms of litigation.
Great, thank you. So we can look at accessibility through the lens of legal compliance, and we need to do that. But Erin and I also like to consider accessibility as a civil right. And when we approach accessibility as a civil right, we found that resistance to accessibility and to the change that has to happen within the culture of an organization, that resistance goes down and people start asking questions like, how can we make sure that all individuals have full access to an education that's empowering and transformative? Or how can our company be a more socially just place for everyone to work and learn in? So people start to ask different questions when they really look at accessibility as a civil right, and they start realizing that accessibility is really deeply tied to the mission and vision statements of their organizations. So let's see, Erin, we also really feel that we're better able to embrace the spirit of accessibility and the principles of universal design for learning when diversity and inclusion is addressed for all people, correct?
I completely agree, yes.
So you mentioned that there are legal ramifications related to accessibility.
Sure. So it really is important to be proactive about accessibility because your options can really be diminished and your costs can explode if you wait to address accessibility until after a complaint or a lawsuit has been filed. Just a few really well-known examples of this. So for example, at the University of Montana, as part of the settlement agreement, we actually are required to evaluate the accessibility of every piece of hardware and software that is being procured for use on our campus. This goes from the student information system that's accessed by each and every student in order to register classes to a single piece of software that's being used by one person on their one computer. Because we waited until after a lawsuit, there was no flexibility now in terms of how we address the software. So another example is the Seattle Public School System. They signed a settlement agreement that required accessible sites, accessibility language be included in all their procurement agreements, and a system-wide audit of accessibility. The costs associated with implementing that settlement agreement were estimated to be about $815,000. And another kind of non-education related example of this is Target Corporation. They were sued by the National Federation of the Blind for having an inaccessible retail site. And they were required to pay $6 million in class damages, and they had to really significantly restructure their website after this lawsuit that alleged that their site was inaccessible to persons with disabilities. Nearly all of these situations are things that could have been avoided had accessibility had been considered earlier on during the design of websites, the purchase of technologies, and the creation of content.
Right, and it's much better to consider those accessibility needs first rather than going back and retrofitting, correct?
Yeah, it's going to be easier for your developers and it's going to save you money in the long run.
Great. So we really believe in the Moodle Learning Management System. We believe that you can use Moodle to radically improve the learning experience for your users. And we know that people want 24/7 access to relevant information in an LMS, and they want to be able to use their mobile devices to access content anywhere. And when people design accessibly in Moodle, they meet the needs of users, whether they're on mobile devices, whether they're using assistive technologies, whatever the case may be. If you design effectively and accessibly in Moodle, then you're benefiting all your clients, your students, your faculty, your customers, whoever your audience may be. So we've got plenty of time left here to talk about the services we can provide for you, either remotely or face-to-face. So Aaron, do you want to start first? We'll just kind of swap out here, client-tailored services.
Yeah, so we can really provide any kind of accessibility-related services that you may need, whether this is going to be creation of accessibility documentation, policy language. We really can, have the ability to tailor whatever services we offer to your particular needs. And as we said earlier, Marlene and I, the combination of us as a sighted person with really strong educational and instructional design experience, and then my experience as an assistive technology user and kind of a technologist in general, we really can diversify whatever service we need to fit your particular needs.
Great. We've done a lot of work with workshops and in-services. We've done in-services to college faculty in another location at the start of a semester. Oftentimes, because we're in a university environment, most of the time, we're being contacted by deans, associate deans, or department chairs, and then we work with them to develop a workshop that really fits the needs of their faculty and their students. And we really try and look at the needs of the audience, and our real major focus this year is working with STEM content and really reaching out to that side of the campus where they're doing lots of STEM teaching, and we want to make sure that they're making the most of designs in Moodle for their students. So we do lots of diverse things with workshops and in-services.
Yes, we do. Another service that we have that we can offer is where we essentially train your trainers. I'm going to steal Mike's line for this because I thought it was fantastic. Identify the rock stars in your organization. We like to refer to them as the accessibility champions within your organization. Here at the university, one of the ways that we've kind of applied this concept is we've identified people in particular departments or academic units who want to be the accessibility champion for that department. And we train them on accessibility, and then they can be the accessibility point person for that department or program when there's a faculty member or a staff member who wants to evaluate the accessibility of a document or has questions about how to make a document more accessible. We can provide the training for those accessibility champions who can then take that information and spread it out throughout your organization.
Great. And then we do find a lot of people have a backlog of course content that needs remediation, and we're willing to work with them. We like to make sure they understand the principles that we're applying, but we can do that back-end remediation of content for people. That saves them time. We find that the people we work with, they want to embrace accessibility. They have no arguments with it, but it's just a matter of how they balance that workload. So we tell them, moving forward, make sure you design accessibly, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation, whether it's a Word document, your syllabus, whatever you're designing going forward, here are the principles you should be embracing. But if we can help you with that backlog of content that is not fully accessible, then we're willing to provide that service as well.
Yes, absolutely. Another service that we can offer is just peer testing. So whether you want to test a handful of courses to kind of get a feel for how accessible your course development seems to be going, or if you have particular integrations with your LMS that you would like to know, well, is this product that we've integrated into our learning management system, is it accessible? We can provide accessibility evaluations of that. If you have templates that are given out for instructors to create syllabi or to kind of provide the basic structure of a course, we can provide testing of that. And as we had said again earlier, between Marlene and myself, we really can cover the whole gamut of accessibility testing. So we can test the accessibility for screen reader users. We can test accessibility for users of screen magnification software. We can test captioning and audio descriptions to make sure that they meet DCMP guidelines. We can really test a wider range of things for you, and we can provide that kind of manual testing and tie that in with reports from automated accessibility evaluation tools. One of the things to note about automated accessibility evaluation tools is that on average they can only test about 20% of criteria outlined in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So only about 20% of things in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines can actually be tested using an automated testing tool. The other 80%, they have to have manual accessibility testing done by people like Marlene and myself.
So the image on the screen here is a picture of us working with a product developer in the UK, and he's trying to create what is called a born accessible product, meaning it does not need any retrofitting. He's taken accessibility into consideration while he's designing the product. So from time to time we would meet him in Skype, and Aaron would share his screen in Skype, and I would watch to make sure Aaron was picking up on everything I was seeing, and we were talking to the developer, and Aaron was also recording his screen. So at the end of an hour protocol where the developer had a set of questions he wanted us to run through in his protocol, at the end of the hour we sent him the video recording so that he could re-watch it, and then he would go back to the drawing table, refine his product, and then contact us again to see if the improvements were working. And sometimes he did improvements right on the fly.
Yep.
And Aaron tested them in real time. So we work with vendors. You may not be an educational institution. We know lots of you on this call are you're in businesses or other fields, and we do work with companies to help them with the improvements of their products. I'm going to jump back up to template development in our list. I might have changed the list a little bit on you, Aaron. No worries. Sometimes in order to be accessible, a department will ask for us to develop a template, and then they just insert their content into that template. So they all know they have the basic structure of accessibility built for them. They don't have to worry about it. Their audience is getting a consistent user experience, and the template guides them in creating accessible content. So templates are another easy way for us to reach a large number of people.
Absolutely.
And the final one is tutorials. We can create tutorials for just-in-time learning. As Aaron said, we're very flexible on how we're willing to work with an organization and make sure that we help organizations get on that road towards accessibility. It's a journey, and we're always sort of arriving, all of us. No one is ever totally there.
Right.
But we love to help organizations get on that road, and we love to provide that support for them. So our contact information is on the screen. And with that being said, Randy, I think we get it pretty much right on the money in terms of the time, and so we'll turn it back over to you.
That was great. Thank you so much. Let me take the screen back here. Hold on one moment. All right. And right now, for the audience, you won't see my screen. I'll pull it back up here in a moment. But I'll give you a moment, Aaron and Marlene, to review the questions. And Mike, there was a question here about LTI versus xAPI, which I think might be interesting for the audience to hear. But first, I'll say that Aaron and Marlene, this is such a great topic, such a hot topic right now for a lot of our clients, especially those in higher ed or K-12, because Moodle has a lot of the features that can be leveraged if they're used properly. But a lot of our clients find that they have some issues with this where they're not compliant, again, which is what makes this such a hot topic right now. And quickly, I'll run through some of the things we do here at eThink, and then I'd like to see, Mike, if you're still in the spot to answer that LTI versus xAPI question, and then Aaron and Marlene, there's some good questions about audits and K-12 that I think could be useful for the audience. I will say with eThink, we'd love the opportunity to work with you if you're a Moodle user. We affectionately say, only Moodle nerds. We love the system. We live in it every day. Some of the things that separate us from maybe some of the other partners, and we've had 90 of our clients move to us in the last 2 years from other Moodle sites. We provide an unlimited support model. I'm sure a lot of folks on the line today are familiar with the line, Moodle's free like a puppy, right? It's free. I could give you a puppy, but there's a lot of tender love and care that has to go into training that puppy and making sure that puppy does what it's supposed to do. So Our model is unlimited. We have a track record of being back with support tickets, back in touch, human contact in under an hour. Reporting is completely customizable, and the superior customer service is really one of our key advantages. I'm going to put in the chat here eThink's next webinar. It's Moodle Moodle by eThink for higher education. I've put the registration link right there in the chat in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you could join us, we'd love to have you. And of course, feel free to reach out to any of us if you should have some questions. Micah, are you in a spot where you might be able to really briefly, I don't know if there is such thing as a 60 to 90-second answer on this one, but discuss the differences between LTI and xAPI?
So I'm playing down the highway here. Let me do my best. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is take the words of some really smart people that put this together, and I'm going to pop these right in the chat window. I've got, there's too long slide share. There's a long slide share piece, and there's something else here. Because there's let me reframe the question to one that's maybe more complex to answer. How does CMI5 relate to LTI, to xAPI versus my own home rolled solution? And so I think that's something that's worth taking a look at from a due diligence perspective within your organizations. And I'll throw the links in the chat here. But I think the other thing that's really critically important to realize is, but if you want to build parts and make parts work together, xAPI is built on the idea of making the data easier to handle and making the communication. So you can build it as an ecosystem. You can make your own language, and you can build your own learning ecosystem. But if you want to get there easier, faster, it's helpful. One of the things and I'll close my 60-second commercial with this. One of the things that's really important to remember is DoD has an instruction that requires SCORM for procurement. That's really what opened the aperture to create the learning management system marketplace. The DoD instruction has changed. It is now requiring Experience API and learning record stores for learning that's done for government. Because of that, you're going to see a lot of technology investments in this space, and you're going to see a lot more things become available to you to plug in. So, like I said, you can make up your own language for your village, but you're better off to use the language that's going to be required by the government because the market's going to move.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I know there's some questions coming in here hot and heavy. We will stick around till after 3 if the presenters have the opportunity to answer some of these questions. Mike, I know you're on the road. If you have to jump, we truly appreciate your time, and I'll make sure to get you these follow-up questions that are coming in following this session here. Aaron and Marlene, I'm sure you've had an opportunity to review some of the questions that are coming in. Is there anything specific you'd like to address to the audience?
Yeah, I saw the one question about if we performed audits, which is a really great question and something that is required when you have an OCR complaint. Aaron, do you want to address that question?
Yeah, I'll just say that, yeah, we would be willing to perform an audit. We'll work with the client to determine the scope and nature of the audit, you know, whether you're wanting to just evaluate a particular segment of courses in a particular program like math or sciences, or if you're kind of wanting to get an overall audit of course accessibility across all of your different academic offerings. We're willing to work with you. You know, just depend, whatever you'd like. We'll tailor it to meet your needs.
And then there's a question about where people can go to find out more about universal design principles and protocols. If you just Google universal design for learning, you'll find some great resources out there. The main go-to place where I get a lot of great information is CAST.org. CAST.org. It's the whole idea of universal design for learning originated with the neuroscientists and the researchers there at CAST, and they're always thinking and learning and improving and providing new opportunities. So I tend to keep an eye on that website. There's also the Center for Universal Design at North Carolina State. Just some great resources. The University of Washington also work with Universal Design for Learning. There's an abundance of information out there. You're welcome to email us if you want actual links. That we're happy to email back to you.
Excellent.
I can't really see questions.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there. You say you're having a hard time seeing the questions?
I don't see the other questions. Can you pick maybe one more and we can answer that?
Sure. There was a question here I saw earlier about, let me come in here. I believe it was about if you do work in K-12 as far as accessibility is concerned.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my background, I started out getting a master's in special education and certifying so that I actually wanted to teach social studies and work in a non-ability group classroom so I could have students of all abilities in my social studies class. So I worked, oh gosh, I don't know how many years, 23 years in the K-12 system. And then I was hired by the district to teach teachers how to use technology. And so I'm very familiar. Erin and I actually did a Universal Design for Learning presentation at a workshop last summer for K-12 teachers coming back for extra credit. So we're definitely attuned to that K-12 environment.
Great, great. And we are right at the end of our hour. Ian has a really good question. It might be a little more in-depth than what we can cover now, but Ian, might I recommend that maybe you could reach out to Erin or Marlene, and I'll certainly follow up with all of the questions to all of our presenters. A big thank you to everybody who joined us, the audience, Erin and Marlene, Mike, I truly appreciate your time. I really enjoyed this session. Definitely one of our best sessions. Again, we had 350 registrations today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any further questions about the services provided by eThink, we'd be happy to provide you with a hands-on demonstration. And if you want to reach out directly to one of our presenters, their contact information is on the screen. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Thanks so much.